You won't want anything else. And that sacrifice you think that you have to give or to have to give up, you realize on the backside of that was nothing to give up. And you realize on the backside that this is the most wonderful thing that you could possibly have. And I'm going to be in Daniel. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 10, but we're going to kind of lay some background in Daniel. Because how many knows Daniel? Actually, Daniel, as I was doing this search, Daniel is the most quoted book in the New Testament of the Old Testament books. Daniel's quoted more times than anybody else in the New Testament. And it's funny because he is considered one of the major prophets, right? In how he's classified in major and minor prophets, not because of books of length, but because of the amount of prophecy that actually is given there. And so as you look through Daniel, you can see the stories, and probably some of the most memorable stories in Scripture is found in the book of Daniel, right? And so we're going to kind of walk through these about what it takes to hear from God. What does that look like in your life? What does that look like in your daily walk with God? Because a lot of people I never heard from God. I've heard that so many times, and I said, have you asked? It's always usually my first question. Have I asked? Have you asked? Have you listened for Him? Joyce Meyer has a famous statement that I absolutely love, and everybody has those statements, but she has one of those statements that I absolutely love, that a one-sided conversation is a lecture. One-sided conversation is a lecture. So if your prayer life is all one-sided, it's not a conversation, it's a lecture. And if we're not careful, what our prayer life turns into is a complaint department. And we just rattle off a whole bunch of complaints, and some of us even build lists. Not lists like I have right now, but lists. And we pray list, and I'm not against that. I did that for many years, right? That I wrote out everything, and I had lists of stuff that I would pray for to make sure I didn't miss anything, right? And when you get several things going and several people to pray for, it's real easy to miss somebody. And I know nobody has any forgetfulness in here, but I forget some people. So I wrote lists for a lot of years. But then I realized my list was turning into a complaint department. And if I wasn't careful, I would just go through my list and be done for the day. Anybody? It's easy to get that way. And it becomes, I love habits, right? I'm a creature of habits, so I love habits. But if you're not careful, you'll grow into a habit with God, a spiritual habit, and you'll forget about Him. And it turns into, I got to get my list done, right? Especially for those really task-oriented people, like myself. And you turn into, I got to get my list done. Right? Bible reading's the same way. God had to convict me because I had a number of scriptures that I had. A lot of people try for, 5 chapters, 10 chapters, 15, 20, 25, whatever it is that you want to read that day, right? And you have a number of scriptures that you're trying to get through. Until I found myself getting through my 10 to 15 chapters a day and not remembering what I read. Nobody's ever done that before. But I got it done. I checked my spiritual box, right? But what I didn't realize was I was falling out of communion with God. I was getting my list done, but I was growing further apart. Examine your walk from time to time and find out if what you're doing is actually drawing you closer to God or not. It may be spiritual things that you're stumbling on. And now I would rather read one scripture and know what it says than 10 chapters and not remember what I read. Now, saying that, I still have a goal every year of reading the Bible 3 times through a year, right? Still my goal, right? So I still have that as a goal. But if I hit a passage or I hit a verse or I hit a section that really God is dealing with me, I may go back and read it 15 times. Instead of reading 15 chapters, I may read this one 15 times. But at the end of it, I'll know what it says to me. And I may have to dwell on that passage for an hour. I may have to dwell on that passage all day. You say, well, I got to work. I do too, right? I put in 10, 12 hours a day too. So I understand that. But that doesn't mean that you have to do nothing else but that. But let that verse or that passage dwell on your mind all that day or all that time until you hear the voice of God say, release you, and go on and say, yes, I got that. Get what it's got saying to you. Don't let go of it. And so Daniel was a man. Can I say his prayer life too? Because you're like, I can't pray an hour a day. Okay, that's fine. Can you pray a minute a day? Can you pray 30 seconds? Can I tell you your prayer life will grow wherever you start it from? That relationship will start wherever you allow it to start. If you allow 1 minute a day, God will take that 1 minute a day. The next year, He'd turn it into 5. That 5 minutes will turn into 10. That 10 minutes will turn into 20. And that 20 minutes will turn into whatever you allow Him to have. But I tell you, the more that you allow Him to have, the more you want to turn over to Him. And what you find out in your life is the more you give to Him, the more other stuff gets done anyway. The more productive you actually are. With the time of sacrifice that you thought you couldn't give up, you find it real easy to give up, and you find out the other stuff gets done anyway. And you find other things that become less and less important to you. That TV time that you can't do without, that next television show that you binge watched that you had 12 hours in, becomes less and less important to you. Right? That Netflix series that you missed last season, but you stumbled on it in season 3, so you watch all 3 seasons in one weekend. Nobody's done that here. I hear about it at work all the time. And you can ask anybody that lives with me. My television watching is almost zero because I could care less. And some of that is because I'm an engineer and I have zero personality. But the other of it is, I'd rather watch a YouTube video on how to fix a sewing machine that I don't own. But, I do weird things like read tax code for fun. So I live a boring life. But pop culture is not one of them things for me. But I want to get into the Word because I want people to understand that Daniel's a book of foundation and principles, and it builds on itself. And when we skip to a section like chapter 10, and we try to begin in chapter 10, I'm going to say that some people are lost because they haven't read chapter 1 or 2, and they've never heard who Daniel even is. And I challenge a lot of young preachers to make sure you lay a foundation before that you lay out the ending. And so Daniel is a man that is a high-ranking official in his home country. Daniel was actually, it's thought that Daniel was actually king, or from a descendant of King Hezekiah, is where he actually came from. His lineage and his heritage was probably from Hezekiah. So he was of noble descent inside of Israel when he was taken captive by Babylon. When Babylon come in and invaded, due to a prophecy by Jeremiah, that Jeremiah prophesied that Israel would come into bondage and captivity because of their transgression and sin. Understand that transgression and sins always lead you into captivity of some kind. And you say, well, there's nobody invading army. Understand that some people's depression and anxiety is captivity because of what they allow in their life. And what they allow to speak. If you watch a whole bunch of news, and I don't care which of the 3 letters that you watch is, whether it's NBC, ABC, Fox News, or whatever, all of it is geared around fear. Every bit of it. You ever heard any good news? No, because it's not popular, right? It doesn't sell tickets. So they're not going to tell you anything positive, so why watch it? Oh, that might be offensive. Okay. By the way, news comes on your phone, or weather comes on your phone. I check every job site almost every morning in less than 5 minutes. Don't worry about that. It'll be fine. You can only fall so far. It's only 8 inches. So, but if you think about that, what do you allow to speak in your life? Because Daniel didn't always have the easiest life. He didn't always have the best life. He didn't always have the easiest path, and he didn't always have the circumstances that was just right for him. So you look at Daniel. Daniel was took into slavery when he's a teenager. He's made a eunuch as a teenager. For those that don't know what that is, go home and look that up. I'm sure that was fun for a teenager. And yet he was put into slavery. But then, and he allowed, and all of that kind of stuff, he didn't allow it, but he didn't have really any choice in the matter, right? But he didn't allow that to allow him to grow bitter. Because your choices on your attitude is just that. It is a choice that you make. Circumstances happen to everybody. It's how you're going to deal with them. People's told me, they said, you know, you're the happiest crippled person I've ever seen. I said, well, why are you going to be sad? You have to allow that to get in your spirit. It's not something that, you know, that is just forced upon you. You have to allow that. And I think that it's important for us to realize that if we don't allow it, what power there is in that. And so Daniel doesn't allow that to come in his life. And in chapter 2, we're going to start out with Daniel. And I'm not going to go through these, and I'm not going to read scripture a bunch of this, but I'm just kind of going to go through the story to bring us up to chapter 10. And we're going to run through about 8 chapters here, 8 to 9 chapters here, to get us to where Daniel is. Because if we don't understand where he comes from, because chapter 10, he's over 80 years old. He's lived a lot of life. Right? Anybody in here close to 80 realize that he's lived a lot of life, and you don't get there in a day. And there's a lot of stuff that happens to you. I mean, me and Tiffany's approaching 20 years of marriage. There's some things that we know now that we didn't know in year 1. Anybody learn some things about your spouse that you did in year 20 that you didn't in year 1? Right? You know, we've always talked about, you know, doing a vow renewal, and I always make a joke of her. I said, you know, I don't want to get up there and lie twice. But no, I'm so happy that I married her. She's just the most wonderful person that I've had in my life. So I'm very, very appreciative of her and everything that she does, although I give her a hard time continuously. I always say our love language is sarcasm. So it works for us. It doesn't work for everybody. Some people gets annoyed. We enjoy it. So anyway, she had 3 older brothers. She can dish out just as much as she can put. So don't feel sorry for her. So, but Daniel in chapter 2 has one of his first tests after being taken in captivity. And there's some power in knowing some of this, because in chapter 2, he's confronted with one of the first things that Jesus is also confronted with in the New Testament. He's confronted with food. In particular, he's confronted with food that is sacrificed to idols, and he knows it's sacrificed to idols. And he understands that his God and him, they have a bond between each other, and they said, I'll have no other gods before you. He understands the first law of Moses. He understands the covenant between him and God means more than him and food. And sometimes you have to figure that out. Which one means more to you? Does food matter more to you, or does God's relationship matter more to you? Because he's going to make a decision here that is life-altering and life-ending. Because the person that he goes and talks to about this says, well, if your countenance or your stature looks worse than somebody else, the king will kill me for letting you suffer. So my life is in jeopardy. And Daniel makes a proclamation to him. He says, I want you to put me to the test and my words to the test. And he says, I want you to just give me vegetables only, and I'll eat vegetables, and we'll see in a period of time which one looks better. And in a period of time, he looks better. Now, I'm not for becoming a vegetarian. I really like meat. But here is a test. It's more than about food. It's about a test to see if I will follow God or not. And since this thing is on the very edge and I know my wife's blood pressure is going up, I'm going to move it back just a little bit. Yes, I'm not going to sit down. Okay. So, as we jump in to the story, I'm going to read just 3 passages here. And 2:17 through 19, I feel like I need to. I wasn't going to, but I feel like I need to. Daniel went into his house, and made the matter, well, this is a dream. So later, that was the vegetables in chapter 1. In chapter 2, this moves out to starting a fast. And he started a fast to know and to declare a dream. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And Nebuchadnezzar is the king that Daniel is serving underneath. Nebuchadnezzar is also the one that goes and gets Daniel. He's the head of the Babylonian Empire. He has a dream, and he has a unique request. He has a request for all the magicians and astrologers and soothsayers and demonic people to interpret a dream that he does not tell them what it is. And he says, really, if you have a spirit in you of discernment, then your spirit that you lean on can also interpret my dream without me telling it to you. And if your God can't, then I'm going to kill you. A lot of times we have in our life, we have these ultimatums that come up. And we really find out if we're going to serve God or if we're not going to serve God. We're going to find out if the pressures of this life will change us or we will not bow to those circumstances. There will be only a few moments in our lifetime that will really change and really rattle us. For the most part, we can just go on as it is. But there are certain points in our life that will come down to an absolute in our life, and we have to make a choice in those moments, and it will define our life forever. You will not be able to go back and get that moment back again. Daniel here, he makes a declare and a speech towards one of the guards that's sent to kill him, by the way. Because the soothsayers and prognosticators and astrologers and all of those demonic people could not reveal the dream to Nebuchadnezzar because they don't have a living God. Daniel says to the guard that's coming to kill him, why is the king so rush or hasty in his decree? Give me a moment, give me some time, and I will go back and I will reveal the dream to the king. He's pretty confident. Why is he so confident? Because he knows who his God is. Understand, he has a relationship already here in this time period of who his God is. We're going to reveal here a little bit later on in chapter 6 how he knows his God so personable, because it comes out in chapter 6 that doesn't reveal it to now, about a pattern in Daniel's life that gives him this strength. So Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. That's Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego for those that don't recognize the names. Those are their Babylonian names that we know them better by. And these are their Jewish names. And he told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of these wise men of Babylon. And the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. And then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And Daniel answered the king and gave him the dream. Then Daniel was promoted. Can I tell you, Daniel really didn't care about the promotion? He wasn't in it for the promotion. But he still got some work to do in here. That's in, and interpreted the dream. That's here. Now let's skip over to chapter 4. I'm going through this rather quickly. Nebuchadnezzar has a second dream. It's first, this is the second dream. We're skipping some time period here. At this time, Nebuchadnezzar understands that Daniel's God is different. Nebuchadnezzar understands that Daniel will not serve the Babylonian gods. He understands his lifestyle. He understands who he is. He's worked with him for now 20-something years. He's got it. He understands his character. But yet, Nebuchadnezzar, in this second dream, he calls in the same magicians, astrologers, and soothsayers to come in and make known the interpretation of the dream. How many knows that sometimes we do something that's stupid over and over again? We call the same people that give us bad advice last time to give us advice the second time. Stop it. Quit relying on people so much and rely on the Lord. It's more spiritual work to go dig it out for what God has to say to you, absolutely, than to just be lazy and go ask somebody else, but you get a sure answer. Nebuchadnezzar goes back to the same useless well that he went to the first time, and it produces 0 fruit the second time. I love this passage in verse number 8. Well, actually, let's just read verse 8 because we got to get going. At the last, Daniel came in. You see this? At last, Daniel came in before me. He was named Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. Do you understand? At last, he said, at last Daniel came in. He understood that he couldn't even name him. He had to address him in a Hebrew term. Do you understand the amount of respect that Nebuchadnezzar is giving Daniel in this moment? He said, I won't even defile him by his Babylonian name. He references his Babylonian name later on just so people will understand who he's talking about. But he talks to Daniel by Daniel. He references him to that. He named him after one of his false gods. Understand, Belteshazzar was named after a false god because he realized the Spirit of God was inside Daniel, so he must be filled with a demonic presence. But now he realizes he's getting ready to figure out that it's not a demonic presence inside of Daniel. There is one holy God that sits on a throne on high and is able to discern the times and the season to men through interpretation and prophecy. And so Daniel comes in and he says, to whom is the spirit of the holy gods? He understood that Daniel was exceedingly above anybody else in his kingdom. He understood. And I told him the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and there is no mystery too difficult for you. Tell me the visions of my dream. And so I saw the interpretation. And he gives him the interpretation of his dream. Again, Daniel. But Daniel makes known that it is not in him. It is only the God that is inside of him. Always, he's trying to point him back to Jehovah God. All the time, he's trying to point him back to who that he serves. All the time, he's not trying to take credit for it. He's trying to say, it is through Christ that gives me the interpretation that I can give you wisdom. All the time, he's trying to point Nebuchadnezzar back to the truth. And then in chapter 6, we're going to learn something about Daniel. In chapter 6, we're going to learn something about Daniel. In chapter 6, we're going to start out with verse 5, and I'm eventually going to get to chapter 10 where we're actually going. And then the men, this is Daniel in the lion's den, by the way, for one of the most notable stories in the Old Testament. And then the men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint or against Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Because he's blameless before the king. He's honorable. He does everything right. How many knows as Christians we make the best employees? We don't cheat. We don't lie. God tells us to work hard to serve our masters. We should be the best employees. Right? Where God tells us we can't be a cutthroat. We can't try to step over on somebody. God says that he promotes, so shut up and let God promote. We should make the best employees. Right? Daniel makes the best employee. Right? But these people realize that the new king in town, there's a new king now, and they understand that the new king put Daniel over them. And the only way that they can get a new position in life, how many has worked around these people, is to kill the one that's above you. I work with these people. The only way that I can succeed is if I destroy you. How many knows that's not the plan of God? The plan of God is that you work hard and God promotes. Right? I don't have to destroy somebody else's character to promote myself. That doesn't build the kingdom at all. Right? That doesn't build it in a church. It doesn't build it on a job. It doesn't build it in relationships. It doesn't build it in a marriage. It doesn't build it with kids. You cannot destroy somebody else's character to build up your own. Cannot. God will not bless you for that. Matter of fact, He will turn it against you later on. Understand, what you issue out, it will be issued back. Galatians 6 and 7 says, whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. So you cannot plant deception and expect for crop failure later on. It grows well. You ever notice weeds grow better than grass? Whatever you plant to deceive grows really good. You have to cultivate, take care of, water, nurture good things. Bad things take care of themselves. They grow like crazy. Okay. So they won't find anything. So they came into an agreement and they tricked the king. They tricked the king into signing a decree that says that you shall not pray to any other god except for him. How many knows that doesn't work in Daniel's world? He doesn't worship the king. To be fair, the king doesn't care that he doesn't worship him. The king cares that he can get good knowledge and guidance and leadership out of him. That's what the king cares about. But in verse number 10, it says, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he did something unique. He went to his house where he had windows in an upper chamber open towards Jerusalem. And he got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before God as he had done previously. His relationship over this 80-year period was based on 3 times a day and getting down and praying. And it wasn't the silent, lay me down to sleep prayers. Understand, because the people that were going to accuse him in the next few verses were standing outside the house and could hear him praying. He's on the second story inside the house. People are standing outside the house on the first floor. They could hear the man praying upstairs. That means it wasn't quiet. That means he was actively defiant to the king. Not to God, but to the king. And he says, King, I don't care what you say. I'm going to pray to God. But the king didn't take offense. Understand this. The king did not take offense. The king sought on how he could deliver Daniel. You hate to kill the smartest person in your kingdom. If you're a leader, you definitely don't want to destroy the smartest person underneath you. They're probably the reason you got to where you're at anyway. Understand that. They're probably how you got there anyway. It doesn't make sense to kill the smart people around you, right? Leaders, if you're leading a group, don't try to destroy the people underneath you. Try to promote them, and they will promote you. Give them an opportunity, and they'll make room for you too. Make sure that you realize that, people. Make sure that how you treat the people underneath you is how you want to be treated. So he prays 3 times. Understand he has to go to the lion's den. The only difference is that God is in the lion's den with him. God delivers him out of the lion's den, but the people wanting to rule and take over and to kill him end up at the bottom of the lion's den eaten by lions. And not only does it destroy them, it destroys their families, their grandchildren, all the stuff that they had, everything went with them. Understand, when you lead a life of deceit, it leads to destruction, and not only of yourself, but it destroys your family, destroys your lineage, destroys everything that you thought you were working for. It destroys everything. Pays to be honest and upright. Good. I'm glad we set the foundation. Now, one more time. Daniel chapter 9. It's a long introduction. Sorry. One last time before we get into Daniel 10, because this is the beginning really of the prophecy books, or the prophecy chapters. For the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, the descendant of the Mede, a Mede, who was made king after the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books a number of years that according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet must pass before the end of the desolation of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. And then I turned my face to the Lord, seeking Him by prayer and pleas and mercy with fastings and sackcloth and ashes. I prayed to the Lord my God and made confession, saying, O Lord, great and awesome God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love to those who love Him and keeps His commandments. We have sinned and done wrong and acted wickedly in rebellion and turning aside from your commandments and your rules. We have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings and our princes and our fathers and to all the people of the land. To you alone, Lord, belongs righteousness. And I'll stop right there. I know it's in the middle of the verse. To you alone, O Lord, belongs righteousness. He looked back at Jeremiah's writings and understood he was in the middle of 70 years. He understood that there was still some time to go on that clock that God had decreed, and whatever God decreed, he understood that that was what was going to happen. They were going to stay in captivity for 70 years. He is now over 80 years old. He understood that he is not going to live to see the end of captivity. If the stretch of time exceeds out to what it is, he is not going to live to see the end of captivity. He's never going to see his childhood home again. When he left as a teenager, he is never going to return back and see Jerusalem for one more time. He understands that, but what he also understands is that God is a lover of covenant. He is a lover of second chances. He is a lover of repentance. And so Daniel seeks God, and he begins to turn his face to God, and he begins to humble himself. You got to understand, he is the ruler of this kingdom. And besides the king, he is the next in line. There is nothing withheld with him. He's got the nicest home. He's got the nicest clothes. He's got the nicest food. Everything in his life would be perfect for most people. But he says, I am not in my own hometown. I am not back in the covenant place that God placed us in. I am not back in Jerusalem. Therefore, I am a sojourner. I am a pilgrim. I am lost. I am undone. And God, our people are still in slavery. He looked out among the people and said, this is not right. We have sinned and transgressed. It's not God. We have sinned and transgressed and come short of what God has done. Understand, don't blame somebody else for where you are in your life. It's easy and quick to blame somebody else in our life for what goes on. It's easy to look at somebody else and say, well, look, this has happened because of that. Look at my upbringing. It wasn't good. He's in slavery. You're not that bad. He was made a eunuch as a teenager. I can think of better times to have that surgery. There's a reason why that they do circumcision before the male can resist. Most of us wouldn't choose that surgery later on. But in verse number 10, but he intercedes. He's a powerful man of God, even in captivity. You don't realize the authority that you hold with God. When you're a humbled person seeking God, you don't understand the power and authority that you hold. Job was just as much a threat to hell when he's in that ash heap as when he owned all the cattle on those hills. He was just as much a threat to Satan when he was in sores and boils for those 60 years because he would not curse God. And Daniel is a threat to evil, even in captivity. Now let's start with chapter 10. In the third year of King Cyrus, king of Persia, the word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. For the word was true, and it was of great conflict. And he understood the word, and had understanding of the vision. And in those days I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacy, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for these full 3 weeks. What are you saying? He's fasting for 3 full weeks. Fasting for 3 full weeks. Why was he fasting? Because he was trying to hear from God. He's not fasting for the sin in his life. He's not fasting because of anything outside. He's fasting because he needs to hear the voice of God. And he says, I will not quit until I hear the voice of God. Understand, praying takes work. Praying and hearing from God is hard. Understand, you have to deny yourself, take up that cross, and follow Him. Understand that means something, right? It's not free. Sometimes it will cost you something. Understand that you may have to give up something to hear from Him. But understand this, it's worth it, and you can do it if you want it bad enough. If you want to hear from Him, you can do it. You may have to stay on your knees and your face before God until God answers, but God will hear you. We knew a great Assembly of God pastor that his 3 sons were lost. Raised them in church, and they got away from God. Understand, he said, he got to the place that he was so undone, he said, I'm going to fast until my sons get saved. It's a dangerous thing to say. At 20 days, they wasn't saved. At 40 days, they wasn't saved. At 60 days, they wasn't saved. And at 62 days, he died. On his funeral, on his casket, his sons laid 3 roses on his caskets and begged for repentance on his casket. The one that told us one of the stories was one of the 3 that was a pastor now. His dad gave up everything that his children could be saved. What are you willing to do to move that needle to the next place? What are you willing to do to move that needle past where it is? Are you willing to go that extra mile? Daniel said, I give up everything. He's trying to rule a nation. Because some people say, I can't do that, I'm busy. He's the ruler of the nation. Besides the king. How many decisions do you think the king made without Daniel? None. None. And he says, I put it all off for 3 weeks, and I ate no bread. And on the 24th day of the first month, I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris. And I lifted up my eyes, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt fine as gold from Uphaz around his waist, and his body was like beryl, and his face was like the appearance of lightning, and his eyes were of flaming torches, and his arms and his legs were like gleaming and burnished bronze, and the sound of his words were like sounds of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. And I alone was left, and I saw the great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearful and changed, and I retained no strength. And then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep with my face to the ground, and behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and my knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and I stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. And then he said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. And the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me these 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, or archangel, came to help me. For I was left there with the kings of Persia. And I came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision, if for days yet to come. Understand, Daniel got his answer. Daniel prayed in heaven, and God dispatched angels to give him the answer. Not only an angel, but archangels to appear before Daniel. And there was a fight going on in heaven between the devil and the angels to bring the answer back to Daniel. And they thought it was important enough to leave the forces of heaven, to leave the throne room of God, to come help to get the answer to a man that was praying beside a river. Understand that you're powerful enough to stay before God, and God will move heaven and earth to get you an answer if you'll stay and seek Him until the answer comes. We give up far too early to hear the message that God has for us because we're too weak in our mind and our countenance, or don't believe that God really is going to answer, and God has given up, and God doesn't hear. But sometimes there's something going on in the heavens that we do not understand, we do not see, and we cannot perceive. But stay faithful. He is bringing an answer. Stay faithful. He is bringing an answer. Stay faithful. Stay on your knees. Stay on your face and say, God, I won't leave until you answer me. God, I won't leave until you give me hope. I won't leave until you give me what I came for. But God, I'm going to stay with you. And I will not leave. Daniel was a man at 80 years old, was more a threat to hell at 80 years old than he was in the first day when he came as a Babylonian teenager into the kingdom and said, you know what, I'm going to make a life of prayer. I'm going to make a life of supplication. I'm going to make a life of fasting. I'm going to make a life of seeking God. And I'm going to make a life of hearing God. And people are going to understand when I walk in the room, it's a different place because I'm here and I bring the presence of God. Understand, it's different when you lead a life that is segregated to the Lord. When you walk in the room, it's different because you bring Him with you. That costs something. That costs something. But you can have it. You can hear God. You can be in His presence if you seek Him. He wants to hear from you, church. He doesn't need you sitting on a pew not talking to Him. He needs you on Monday opening your voice and saying, Lord, I want to have what you want for me today. God, I want you today. God, I want what you want for me today. I don't want what I want anymore, but God, I want what you want today. God, you open the windows of heaven so I can receive what you want. God, if that's persecution that you want from me today, God, I want that too. God, if you want me to minister to the one that hates me, God, I want that too. If you want me to go out and tell somebody about the love of Christ, God, I want that too. God, if you want me to stay in here and just seek your face all day, God, I want that too. What do you want, Lord? Because I want that too. That should be your cry. That's how you hear the voice of God. That's how you move the needle beyond where you are. That's how you take it to the next level. That's where you get to where Daniel is. And can I tell you, he didn't get there in a day. This took him 70 years of seeking God to get to this place. 70 years of seeking God to get to this place. Your prayer life isn't built in a day. Don't get aggravated in a day. Don't be aggravated if you come in and it's not like somebody else. Understand that it's your walk, it's your life, and God will bring you to the place that He wants you at. But stay faithful. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. And He will get you there. If you want to hear from Him, if you need something for Him, I want you to come and let's pray this morning. Let's come and let's